I score 1500 plus on the SAT with self-study? What are the strategies I can use to perform my best on test day? If you're looking for answers to those questions, stay tuned because you've come to the right place. Hello world, I'm Adya. Welcome back to my channel. This video is not going to be just like any other video because here I'm going to tell you not only about what you should do, but also how you should do it so that you know how to actually apply the things you learn in this video and use strategies that will help you to get the score you've always wanted. And the best part, you don't have to spend even a single penny out of your pocket. So let's get started. In the first part, I'm going to talk about how I scored a 1510 on the SAT as an international student completely through self-study. In the second part, I'm going to share tips and strategies that you could use so that you not only improve your study skills, but actually apply what you learn here into your test prep journey. In the third part, I'm going to share some test day tips and tricks that you could use to put your best foot forward. So let's get started. So I took my SAT in the 10th grade and I scored a 1510 on it with 720 in the evidence-based reading and writing section and 790 on the math section. I did not take the SAT essay as it's almost obsolete now. So first I took the official SAT practice test on the Khan Academy website, and I remember I scored around 1370 or 1380 on my first attempt, and as you can imagine that was not the score I wanted. So after that I prepared for the SAT for about 2 months before my exam in October. I would like to say that the best free resource that you could use for your SAT preparation is undoubtedly Khan Academy. Now this is the place where I spent most of my time because I remember that I practiced about more than 5,000 questions of, from English reading passages, from the writing passages, math questions, the no calculator section, the calculator sections. On the Khan Academy there's a dashboard that you could use. You could practice, you can choose your daily goal, you can choose your monthly goals, and accordingly you can pick a schedule that works for you. Even if you are stuck on a question, it has those recommender videos that you could watch that will help you to hone the skills that actually are required for that particular question. So it is your go-to source if you want to score well and if you want to practice the highest quality material out there for free. Now you might be wondering, why didn't I mention the official College Board's SAT guide in this video? Now that is because all the 8 practice tests that are in the book are available for free on Khan Academy. Yes, you heard that right. Tip number 1 is to use quality practice materials. Now remember, you gotta focus on quality, not quantity. That you should steer clear of all the third-party resources such as books, websites, and practice materials because 99% of the time they're either too easy, too hard, or just totally off, and they do not represent the actual question types tested on the SAT. Which leads me on to tip number 2, which is do deliberate practice. What do you need to do is that you need to once you're done with a particular skill set, move on to the other skill set. Don't just, keep on doing the same thing again and again, because you need to practice the questions that you are not good at, whose skills you don't already have. So instead of doing that, even if you spend, 10 minutes on a question whose answer or whose skill you did not know already, that might help you. Tip number 3 is be ruthless about your mistakes. Now, what I mean by that is that Oftentimes, we find ourselves, it's very difficult for us to, look at our own mistakes, just to drill them and, point our own mistakes. But this is exactly what we're trying to do here. Because the SAT is not just any other, high school test or English test or math test for that matter. This is a test that tests your skills, that tests how well you can apply a particular concept or a particular, reading skill in a short amount of time. It does not test your content knowledge. And when you see that you have made a mistake on that question, be ruthless about it. Don't be complacent. Don't come up with excuses, because I know that sounds easy, that sounds, more comfortable in the short term, because I did that. I was like, oh, I missed this question because I didn't have enough time or I didn't read it properly. But those are just, superficial reasons and excuses that your brain is trying to make. Okay, so tip number 4 is go deeper. And what I mean by that is that make a thorough analysis of your mistakes. Just don't note them down, or just don't go through the answer explanations and think that, okay, I'm all set, because you're not. Because after you read a particular question, after you know that I have made a mistake in this question, dig deeper into what exactly went wrong in that question. Now, some of the superficial excuse or reason that you might come up with is that, okay, I ran out of time on this question, or maybe my calculator was not working, or maybe I just didn't read the question very well, I was distracted, and blah, blah, blah. Well, those are only the superficial reasons. Dig deeper. Ask yourself, why did you run out of time? Why did you get yourself distracted? What was it in that particular question or in that particular word that you found confusing? How are you going to improve it the next time? What went wrong this time, and what steps are you going to take that will help you, that will ensure that you do not make the same mistake in the future? Tip number 5 is zoom in and zoom out. In the EBRW section, you need to zoom out on the questions. Now, what I mean by that is that you need to take a big picture view in some of the reading passages, because you don't need to go into the nitty-gritty of the question. You don't need to look into every little detail that is mentioned in the question, because remember, there are going to be a lot of details and you cannot always remember them all. That is impossible and that is not needed. Make a summary of the particular paragraph beside the paragraph. Just has to be 2-3 words, nothing fancy, so that you remember what goes on in that particular passage. Often on the SAT, you need to figure out the meaning of a word or a phrase within the context of the passage. So you cannot just focus on that particular word or passage and expect to know its meaning. You need to look at the big picture. You need to see in what context does that word fit in with the rest of the passage, and mark your answer accordingly. But the advice changes in the case of the math section, because in math section, you need to zoom in. And what I mean by that is that you need to look into the details of the question. You need to look at every single value, every single word, because yes, every single word in the math question, in the math section plays a role, and it is there for a reason. Tip 6, eliminate careless errors. Now, these are the kind of errors which are the most frustrating. They're also called silly mistakes, and they're especially more common in the math section, especially on questions that you think are you going to get right definitely, and there's no need to recheck. And I'm personally a culprit of this, of making this error, because on my SAT test day, I got 790 out of 800 on the SAT math section, and when I was going through my SAT score report, I found that I had got one question wrong, and that one question was in the algebra section, which is which at the time felt crazy to me because algebra is like the easiest component of the math SATs. And I did not get a perfect 800 on my SAT math just because of silly mistake and a careless error. Now that is for the math section, like recheck your work, read every word carefully. Now, as far as the EBRW section is concerned, be wary of the no change option. Now, because it says no change and because it's the passage looks right to you, feels right to you, doesn't mean that the answer is always going to be no change. Well, statistically, no change option has a 25% probability of being the right answer. On the SAT, it does not matter what you do on the question paper. What matters and what gets scored is what you write on the answer sheet. So as long as you're not as you don't fill or correctly bubble those answers on the answer sheet, everything goes to waste. So that is a careless mistake, because I've seen, and I've done this myself, that a lot of times you wanted to circle in B, but you end up circling in C, and that's like the worst possible thing you could do to yourself on your SAT prep. So now we're coming on to tip number 7. Now, tip number 7 is that you should develop good study habits. For example, for the SAT, you need to stick to a particular schedule. You need to take time out of your schedule and fix a time slot every day for practicing questions of the SAT. Now, SAT is the kind of test where you need consistency, you need practice, because if you do not do it regularly, you will tend to, forget things, and then it will be really difficult for you to, remember them again and again just as the test day approaches. Tip number 8 is for the EBRW section. Now, in this section, especially for international students, especially for non-native speakers of English, I found that the EBRW section is a bit tougher for us, right? So a tip that has worked especially well for me here was that instead of looking for the right answer, look for 3 wrong answers. Your brain is really good at pointing out what's wrong rather than what's right. So trust me when I say this, the method of elimination works great here. It's so much easier than looking for the right answer. Just eliminate the answers that you think are wrong, and then the answers that you are looking for will come up, like naturally to you, and it will make much more sense. Tip number 9 is have a growth mindset. Now, not only for SAT prep, for no matter what exam you're preparing for, it's important to have a growth mindset, because you, at some point in your test prep, you are going to fail, and it's going to feel like, oh, I cannot improve, like everything's doomed, everything's over, and I just cannot get the score I want. And there's actually a term for it called chunking. Now, if you're someone who's scoring in the 1200s or 1300s, you won't get to score more than 1500 just in a day or in a week. This is going to take time and patience. So, chunk it up, like take baby steps. What matters is that you make progress. You become a bit better than what you were the day before. So be positive about your prep as whole. Do not compare yourself with what others are doing, because this is your journey, your test prep, and your score and your dreams. My 10th and final tip for you is regarding calculators. Now, when I was preparing for the SAT, I looked up which calculator should I use on my test, especially on the math calculator section. Now, for the math calculator section, or for math on the SAT in general, this is mostly going to be pre-calc 10th grade mathematics, or at least that was for me. I belong to the Indian CBSE board. So I was really worried about whether I should get a graphical calculator or a scientific one. Now, the thing with graphical calculators is that they are very expensive. So at the end, I decided that I'm going to take the exam with a scientific calculator. And guess what? It went great. You do not need a graphical calculator for the SAT math section, period. And whoever tells you otherwise is probably exaggerating, because the SAT math section is not built in a way that it's not very calculator or computationally heavy. It is built in a way that you can solve each and every question without a calculator. I personally use the Casio FX991EX Class Whiz calculator, which is right here. So if you were to look at it, let me just show it to you real quick. So this is what it looks like. This is a phenomenal calculator, a scientific calculator. This took care of all my needs. This is the plastic cover that it comes in, and it's really lightweight, sleek, and it runs on solar energy. You won't need to use the batteries at all. And when you switch it on, it has various menus that you could, use on your SAT test. Now the ones that you're going to mostly use is just for like simple calculation on the numeric pad, which is something that a basic calculator can also do. Other than that, some trigonometric functions that you could definitely do here, but apart from those, you do not need like any other extra features. Okay, so now let's move on to the final section of this video, which is test day tips and tricks. So tip number 1, relax and prepare well. Make sure you're getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep and you feel rested. Do not cram the night before your exam, because first, it's not going to help you, and second, you're going to perform worse than what you actually think you can. Tip number 2, prepare well before your test day. Be acquainted with your test location. Prepare your ID documents, such as a passport or your ID documents that are required, that is mentioned on the website, well beforehand, because these are some last-minute issues and hassles that you might face. So be prepared with all your documents. And then make sure that you have your pencils, erasers, a water bottle, your calculator. Even if your calculator runs on solar power, make sure you have some batteries as backup, just in case. Tip number 3 is read directions and instructions beforehand. Because on your test day, you should be well acquainted with what kind and how many questions you're going to get in each section, and the time that you'll get per question. Use the booklet to your advantage. On the SAT, you won't be marked on what you've written on the question paper or the question booklet. So for the math section, you could do your rough work and your calculations on the question paper itself, and then mark your answers on the answer sheet. Now make sure that you do not make any stray marks on the answer sheet. Every written work has to be in the question paper, nowhere else. On the EBRW section, you could use your pencil to underline the passages and to make short, summary or notes beside your passage so that you can refer to it later. Tip number 4 is that thou shalt leave no question blank. Attempt every question. Leave 5 minutes at the end of the test just to get back to the questions that you had not answered earlier. But make sure that you mark every question, because unlike some of the previous versions of the SAT, the current version does not penalize you for wrong answers. So make sure that you answer every question. Tip number 5. Now, this may sound obvious, but do the easy questions first and then get back to the hard questions later. Because on the SAT, every question is worth the same points. So even if you solve a harder question, it doesn't matter, because every question is worth the same point. Tip number 6, your first instinct is usually right. Now, after you've read a question, you will often find yourself in a position where you're not able to find the right answer. Now suppose you've read the question and you think that, oh, okay, I think the answer is option C. And even after a thorough analysis, confused between B and C. In that case, you should choose option C, because your first instinct is generally the right one, and it might turn out to be the correct answer. Tip number 7, timing is everything. On the SAT, you will have a set of questions that you need to solve within a particular time limit. So during your practice sessions, make sure you do timed practice tests, because your results on a timed practice test compared to an untimed practice test will be very different, even if the questions are exactly the same. So you need to practice accordingly. Tip number 8, and my final tip, is relax. Take a deep breath. I know that the SAT is a huge component of your college application process, but it is not the end of the world. SAT is a measure of your test-taking skills. Never use it as a measure of your self-worth. Even if you don't score well on this particular SAT test day, you can always take the test again. Now, I personally took the test only once because I got the score that I wanted on my first attempt in 10th grade, but this does not have to be the case with you. You can take the test as many times as you want. So there you go, folks. Those were my tips and tricks about how you can score more than 1500 on the SAT. Now, if you found even a single tip of this video useful, please like this video, comment down below if you want to know more about any particular tip or strategy that I mentioned. Share this video with your friends, and make sure you subscribe to the channel, because I will regularly keep uploading videos that will help students like you. My channel is an effort to help all the students, especially international students out, because I know that there aren't many resources available for us. So this channel is an effort from my part to help students like you totally for free, and to help you with resources that can enable you to get the score you want and get into your dream university. Now, as you already might know, I'm a full scholarship winner to Syracuse University, and I'm going to start my computer science degree in fall 2021. So if you want to know about my entire journey from SAT, extracurriculars, essays, GPA, and everything, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because I'll regularly post videos and you do not want to miss out on those. So I'll see you in my next video. Till then, bye-bye. You can also follow me on Instagram @AdyaParida to stay updated, and make sure you check out my website